It's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. It does not matter how much. There's, you get the millionaire next door, the people who make $30,000, $40,000 a year and they save up to be a millionaire. It's not the money you make, it's the money you keep. We make sure that we keep the profit and we put it away in a separate account, and we make sure that goes into our financial advisor, our accountant. Everybody is all aligned. That's the same company, and we have direct deposits going into those, and making sure that it's automatic, that it is automatically taken from us so that we don't have to do it. So you pay yourself first. Right?
Revenues are about ego. It's the cash that matters.
Welcome to the Unstoppables. This is the network, the place where we turn those intentions into dollars, those ideas, those concepts, those dreams into reality. And today, I am pleased and honored to have Heather and Paul Christie, Paul and Heather Christie, with me on the Unstoppables. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Bill.
Hey, thanks, Bill.
We always look for familiarities and connections in life, or at least I do. And that was one of the ways I went forward and became unstoppable in sales. And before we went on the air, we talked about location, where you're from, where you went to school. And you're from Chicago and you now live in Florida.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
So what was the impetus? You can't use weather.
Can you see the logic there? I mean,
besides the weather, why did you move?
The weather.
Well, it was family too. We came down here because we had vacationed a lot because of Heather's family, and I just think it's a changing world now. I mean, it's not, people don't have to stay where they were born anymore, and that's kind of how I felt. I felt even from a little kid when I would come in for vacation, my parents would take me down here. I was like, man, I love Florida for whatever reason. It just totally captivated me. So I kind of knew in the back of my little head when I was a kid that I was going to live in Florida someday. And I just happened to hook up with my beautiful wife. And I found out that she had family that lived in Chicago, or from Chicago, but then moved down to Florida. And we started visiting more and more as we got together. So that's kind of how we get started going to Florida, and then end up moving down here.
It's crazy because that ideation that I had as a little boy, that I always wanted to go to California. I didn't even know where California was on the map, but looked at the Rose Bowl, saw the sun,
yes,
ocean, and I always wanted to go to California. So it's pretty much, and I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, so I grew up in that same type of weather, very cold. It was called the icebox of Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Today, you are executive coaches. You have an executive coaching firm, Evolve Global, and we want to talk about what you do, who you work with, senior lenders, high potentials, and what that means, leadership development, team building, how you do that. We want to talk about that, but I think one of the most interesting dynamics that the audience is going to want to know about is how you make it work. And it looks like, at least on camera, that you're very happy as a husband and wife team working together. Is it separate offices, or how do you do it?
Oh, we have separate offices.
Separate bedrooms too.
Separate if needed.
Yeah, and just like any relationship, there's always the facade.
The on camera and the off camera.
The on camera and off camera, of course.
It's on camera.
Well, and it's interesting because as part of doing the show that we do, the Evolve to Win show, there are times you'll see where we just kind of, we're who we are. We have very, very different behavioral styles, which is not unique for couples, right? You hear the term opposites attract, and it's totally true. And I think the only thing that really, really saves us in terms of how we're able to work together, because we're so different, is that we have become experts in behavioral styles. So our expertise is really understanding the natural inclinations that we have, our strengths, our limitations. And rather than taking, say, Paul's limitations personally, right? Because we've all got mad strengths. And
we're already talking about my limitations.
Well, it's just it's an easy place to go, right? But no, I think there are so many times, whether it's in a relationship as couples or just at work in general, where we take offense to each other. And what we're really taking offense to is just who the other person is being when they're not in their strength zone. And the reality is we're all humans. So everything that makes us great, everything that gives us those incredible strengths, there's always sort of the opposite side of that, right? So we just, we really learn not to take things personally. Wouldn't you say?
Well, and Bill, I would say there's two ways that we've learned to work together. And one is, and it took us a while to figure this out, and it was sitting down and figuring out what the roles and responsibilities were in our business. Mm-hmm. And it's just like in any business, in corporation, whatever small business, you have to have rules and responsibilities and roles for the employees. And
how we measure those roles and responsibilities too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the beginning, when we started working together, we didn't figure that out. We were just doing the same things over and over and just getting each other's way. And it was completely frustrating. The second thing I would say is picking your battles. Definitely picking your battles. You have to decide is it worth going down that road, or is it better just to give it up? And that's something that I've just learned recently, because you can, with working with your spouse, you can be just beating your head against the wall and not getting anywhere. And that can either frustrate you and allow it to destroy your relationship, or you can get off it and just move on and say, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. And even though it may be a massive deal for me personally, and it's hard to give up, you have to realize that it's not worth having those marital issues just because of a business purpose. Mm-hmm. And so those are the two main things that I've found just from working together that we've learned over the last 12 years, right?
Yes. And I would add one more for me personally that I think has made a massive difference. And it's going to sound crazy, but meditation.
Yeah.
And well,
yeah,
I
true.
need it.
It's
I truly need it. It's seriously taken away so much of the stress and has allowed me to be a lot more even keeled. I used to be a little bit crazy before I did the meditation. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely.
I have a lot of good points, salient points from what you said that I want to recap for the audience because I think they're crucial. You know, I had an editor who told me, I don't want to stand on this hill, and if I lose this hill, that's okay. It's not the hill I want to die on. And that's the whole thing mm-hmm. about the battles in the war. And I think collectively, you're in this together to win the overall war. Yes. And so mm-hmm. what battles you want to stand and what mountains you want to take or hills you want to give up, at the end of the day, are you moving forward? Because that's the key. Are you moving forward together in collaboration and having a collective result? The other thing I think right up front is awareness. When you talked about, great point, because you're edifying me, great point about awareness and the spheres of maybe acting outside the sphere of who you are at your core as the person you are because of a certain thing that impacts the behavior in that moment or at that time. Huge. When you're aware that that's happening and you can actually apply then what you're aware of, that's one of the ways to get along, to cohabitate, to collaborate, and to be, I think, human. That was a great point for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back and run that one again and attempt to apply it.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the other thing too is
attempt.
you have to be overly supportive with your spouse and whatever, because there's so many, when you're on this ride together, so you don't get the break of going off to work and being with another group of people, and whether that's good or bad. However, I look at it as I feel like I'm blessed to have this what we created, because when Heather and I met in Chicago, Heather was an attorney and a lobbyist at the time, and I was working in just corporate sales, and I had run a couple of smaller businesses just trying my hand at it because I was always entrepreneurial, and learned a lot from those. When I met Heather, I realized how many incredible skills she had to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, wow, if we team up together, she totally, all the things that I feel like I lack in, it just became apparent to me that those were her strengths. And so teaming up together, for me, I thought was incredible. And I really had to be behind her 100% because she was lacking the
confidence.
Yeah, the confidence to be able to do that. And, and even now it's, a lot of it is just you have your ups and downs, you have your bad days, You have those days that you question, are we in the right business? Should we change the model? Should we, do something different? Should I, go back to being an attorney? All those questions come up, and we really have to keep each other grounded. So, a lot of it is support.
Yeah.
I think
that's a
huge part of it is support.
What we do.
And if I'm listening, I think, and hearing this right, then it's not only support, but you complement each other in the strengths and weakness nexus.
Mm-hmm.
And I would look and I would say in sales, just an assumption, in sales, you have more the emotional quotient you're coming from. And in the law profession, by the way, you probably don't win many arguments. You probably don't, Paul. Okay, I'm just saying. You probably know enough not to win.
You say no, she doesn't.
No, she does. She does.
No shit, right? But you would have more of a logical disposition, I would think, for approaching things. So I think logic and emotion married, literally, is a great compliment. It's a great compliment.
God, that's a great perspective, logic and emotion. Seriously. And what's really interesting is Paul is the one of the two of us who really has such high standards, right? He has the desire for us to just be perfect in business, and I'm the one, of course, I have very high standards too, but I'm more of the one who likes to jump off the cliff and build my wings on the way down. So I'm just go, and he's constantly pulling me back to like fix things up and try to make us look good. So it really is, I think, a great compliment. Paul has everything that I don't, and wish I had.
If you're jumping off a cliff. If you're jumping off a cliff, building wings, you got confidence. Okay.
I do, yeah. But actually, I think I have a ton of confidence, from outward appearances in doing what I've done. In my areas of expertise that I've built over the years. But I do think that having Paul behind me as much as I do with such a strong belief makes all the difference in the world. Like it really, really has helped me to, have the kind of confidence I need to have to be able to take the stage or work with senior leaders.
No, we have to disclose. And I always wondered about this, how much more challenging our life and our business would be if we had children. Now, we don't have children, so we can't speak to having that whole family and relating to that. So we really just are, focused on us on a lot. Now we have nieces and nephews and things like that, but we truly don't have that. And I always wonder what it would be like if we, how much more challenging it would be. So, but I think it's just as far as like the basics of being able to work together. There's no doubt we are frustrated on a daily or weekly basis with each other. But, it's just making it work. You just got to plow through.
That's creative tension.
Yeah.
Creative tension. I like that. Yeah.
I also can appreciate in any business, the division of labor, and you're talking about a division of roles. So we're very clear with, this is my role. This is my role. And I think there's something else that made me smile when you were talking about not taking anything personally. Then you are the only people I know that mastered one of the 4 agreements. So the 4 agreements is, one of them was don't take anything personally. And people that I give that book to, new employees, I would give that book, read this book, be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. Good luck with that. And always do your best. Okay. That's the easier one. All right. The easiest of all. But if you don't take things personally, if you can at least catch yourself, I think that probably is a huge game changer for you.
And I think that's the key, is catching yourself, right? Because we're human still. And of course, and so for me, mastery is not about never taking something personally. It's how fast can I recognize that I've done it and get off it, right? So for us, it's always that drill. How fast can we get off it?
Because you're so loquacious, and because, Paul, you look really good today, I'm going to let you tell the audience what you do. This is usually the part where I read all this stuff that I've formulated. It's better if you tell them what you do. Go ahead.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
good. I'll start. Yeah,
sure.
You fill in the blanks. All right. So typically we start off with any clients that we work with, working with their senior leadership. So we will get brought in to work with CEOs and executive teams. Usually it's privately held mid-sized companies at this stage, although we've worked with everywhere from, the solopreneur professional to, multi-billion-dollar companies. Typically it's a privately held mid-size. And what's really fun is our very first engagement typically looks like a strategic retreat with the executive team. And so even executive teams who have worked together for more than a decade, as an example, we get together with them, we run through some exercises with them, we assess every single executive on the team with our assessment that took us about 9 years of practice to find and perfect and truly learn inside and out. But it is the single most effective assessment that you could possibly take to understand truly, where those blockers are that people have. So we will do individual debriefs with every single executive on the team before we put them all together in a room. And then we teach them how to talk to each other. And what's really fun is we've had such great feedback on this. Actually, one of our most recent events, we had a CEO who during the meeting after we did a communications exercise came up, and as the part of the debrief, he said, all right, I've been working with my COO for more than 12 years now. And I just now in this meeting learned how to communicate with him. And I also learned that the things I have been doing are the things that frustrate him the most. And I never knew that. And he's like, we were, at each other's throats for a long time last year. And he totally recognized and took personal responsibility because he was being a certain way that didn't work for his COO. So it's really taking that team at the highest level and getting the highest level of alignment. Because if you think about it, most executive teams lack that alignment.
Yes.
They're not totally on board with each other. And once you get that, it's really magic because you've got the senior leaders rowing in the same direction. And then inevitably they'll say, okay, this was awesome. We need this for our next level, operational leadership team. And then we'll move in and we'll do the same kind of exercise. And it just goes from there. So alignment, communication, clarity on direction is a big, big part of what we do.
Let me take 2 steps here. The first one is what, in a generalization, what level of pain does that company have to say, okay, I need this? Because the investment in time in something that looks like a retreat is an investment in time, and people generally don't want to see their own flaws in the mirror. That's the whole denial delusion thing and the reflection. So how do you get your clients, and what pain threshold do they come and say, now?
Yeah. Sometimes it's pain for sure. Sometimes there's conflict among the executive team that really needs intervention. And in that case, they understand what we do and they can't get us in there fast enough. And sometimes they'll just have us work individually with 2 executives if it's just an interpersonal issue. But, a lot of times we're working with high growth companies. They're already doing their strategic retreats. I mean, mostly at the privately held mid-sized stage, they're doing strategic retreats, they're doing leadership trainings, and they're doing, at least quarterly sessions, if not monthly. So once they find us, they plug us in and just have us take a portion of that retreat. So it's not as though they're feeling like they need to set aside an entire, separate event, although sometimes we do separate events for them. So sometimes it's pain, but I think a lot of that pain comes from the growth that we're all feeling. We're feeling this pressure to grow because our business is moving, our business community, our environment is moving so fast right now that if you are not constantly influencing growth within your organization, you're dying. And so anybody who's in that space is feeling pain by virtue of how much change is happening, right?
Stage and age of career. Because to me, in a company, especially a company that's driven by an entrepreneur, usually the founder starts at this level. You know this, that you're an infant, you're growing, you get into adolescence. At a certain point, you should probably sell. You either spike or you don't, and you become obsolete at that bell curve stage where you're heading downward. Same thing in people's career. So if you can do this, if you can bring people together and get them to have some kind of share a common mission, because whatever values they have, because people work for themselves, whatever values they have, to bring them in as the collective and have them move forward, I need to bring you in here. Because different stages of millennials to people who are at the stage where they're ready to call it good, different competing, conflicting agendas.
Absolutely.
Competing, conflicting agendas brought through this brain, which, as you now know, is a labyrinth of eccentricity.
Very well said. Very well said. And one of the things that we find constantly is, especially in working with the senior leaders, they've gotten to that certain point in their career. They're at the, senior VP level. There's nowhere else to go other than CEO or another company. And they're really asking themselves, okay, is this it? And I can't tell you how many people are asking themselves, do I reinvent myself right now? What is this all about for me? I've reached this place and I've strived my whole life to get here. Is this really where I want to be? So there are so many internal conflicts that we find, whether it's in the larger organizations or even among entrepreneurs who have owned their company. I face it myself. We face it together. There are times where, I can get bored. I want to reinvent. I want this growth. I've got to be in constant growth mode, right? So it's not uncommon. In fact, it's very, very common for people to get to this stage. Like, as you said, you get to this stage and you say, all right, do I sell? Do I move on? Because I could go down. And so catching someone before they start feeling like they're on that downward slope is really powerful. Just reminding them that they need to discover their, what it's all about for them. What's their leadership purpose? Why are they here? So that part is really fun when we get to really tap into somebody who's struggling, who's feeling that burnout, or just feeling like, they're not sure that they're in the right place.
Yeah. And one of the services we provide is with that assessment that we have, we do debriefs. And I look at an assessment as, the 80-20 rule. 20% you can learn from an assessment. Most people take an assessment, they know how to read just the graph, and then they never look at the report again. And they say, oh, that's cool. The real benefit to an assessment is having a debrief with somebody that really understands the information that's in that, and then is able to relate that to your context, your context, what's going on in your life, what are the challenges, where are the strengths, and you can start matching up those. And it's hugely beneficial to people because it answers questions that may have been going on since they were a kid, and they didn't know why they chose the profession they did or why they do the things that they do, and they figure that out.
Or why they struggle with the profession they chose.
And why do they struggle with certain people? Why do they, and then when there's a coaching relationship after the assessment debrief and then the coaching, it takes that even into a much deeper learning and relationship, uncovering a lot more. And the real benefit, to companies is that, not only you want to be growing your people, but you also are looking at it as a retention strategy as well. And, really allowing these people to benefit from somebody outside of the company that can provide huge value to them. And there's confidence, there's confidentiality, there's all of the things that come along with having an executive coach. And we've seen tremendous growth from people that have been stuck and maybe have thought about getting out of a particular. And we always say, and this is something we're always upfront with as well, it accelerates whatever change is going to happen. So if somebody's on their way out, most likely you're not going to be able to save them. It's going to accelerate the process, which overall is probably a good thing for the company.
And you're bringing me into a deep dive. And when you come to California, Heather, we'll let Paul buy us dinner. I'll take you to get breakfast.
Let's do it.
But I'll get drinks. But
the more expensive part.
I have an assistant with very expensive wine tastes. We just came from 10X. Let me tell you, I'm gonna have to pay for that. Wow, it's gonna be it'll be a long time. But fear is the big field we have to navigate first. And you talked, Heather, about reinvention, which is a word that I embrace, and many don't embrace because they crave the certainty of what they think they know. They crave the certainty of what they think they know in their self-constructed fiefdoms or what they build, and they just want to be in that office, and they don't want to be challenged as leaders. We want to feel safe in our assumptions. And so fear is the biggest part, to expose ourselves perhaps as the emperor with no clothes. Well, and that's the biggest part I found in leadership, is that we don't want to show what we don't know. We don't. So fear is the first field. And when we get together, we're going to develop phase 2 of this talk and talk about fear, moving through failure, and the need to reinvent. Because I reinvent myself. If I said every day, you'd think I was crazy, not just a second. But I'm a champion of reinvention. I think we always have to strive to get better. And I love what you said with that. Let me ask you on this. On your website, we are very much in alignment, to use the word of the day, very much in alignment with success in terms of you're a student of success. And on your website, you say you are a student of success. Take me through what that means to you.
So as I mentioned, if I'm not in growth mode, I'm not feeling good. And I truly believe that if I start to feel stagnant, if I start to, just feel less than good, I've got to check myself and make sure that I've got something in front of me right now that's pushing me outside of my comfort zone. So I'm with you, that daily reinvention, this is powerful. So we are constantly reading, watching, listening to something, someone, to expand our knowledge. And here's how I look at it. The service we truly provide for leaders is to be the leadership experts where we can leverage their time. No one has time in a busy executive role to study leadership and figure out how they should develop their next generation. So succession planning is becoming a nightmare in privately held companies. You've got these people who are starting to mature and age out, and they've taught the skills to all their people, the technical skills of the position, but they haven't taught the leadership skills because they don't really have a consistent program. So we come in and we help them and we deliver this to them by growing them, but helping them know how to grow the people who work for them, and so they can develop them. So in order to do that, we've got to be on the cutting edge. We've got to be constantly questioning our assumptions. We've got to be learning what's happening, what's working, what's not working. So we do that in large part by learning from our clients. You know, we're so in tune with what's going on with them and what their daily challenges are. And we pay attention to how fast those are moving. And we're always looking for new information on what is going to help them feel better. At the end of the day, what's going to help relieve some of their stress and allow them to get the work done that they need to get done, because everybody has to feel productive, right? So I think that's a lot of being the student of success, is just always, what is the next thing we can bring to our clients to make their lives just a little bit easier, to make them more productive and more successful.
And takeaways for the audience are always question your assumptions by expanding your base, as you do, of learning from, or at least listening to, seeking other sources of information, discarding what is not relevant, and maybe looking at and saying, yeah, okay, this is a what if and maybe a possibility of the future. I love that, because I'm always on that quest for different sources of position, information, knowledge that can question my own assumptions. And to do that, I have to be able to overcome my own fears or my need to be I'm omnipotent, I know all, because I don't. Let me ask you number two, who do you think, if I was going to say the word best, just to use that term, who are some of the best leaders today in corporate America, and why?
Do you have, I know one you're going to say.
I mean, I love, not only for the innovation and just cutting edge, Elon Musk. I just listened to his book probably 6 months ago, and I mean, the guy drives so hard, but his vision, people are falling over themselves to work for him. They're 90 hours a week because they don't care. They just want to be able to send somebody to Mars. They want to make the world solar sufficient, you know. They want to create beautiful automobiles that are on, you know, electric and are not burning fossil fuels. I mean, I just love that even more than Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs was, you know, it was kind of at the pinnacle there. But I think Elon Musk is because he's literally changing the world right before our eyes, and with a vision. And I think that's what's missing, you know, in a lot of what we see in working with corporate America and other, is people forget about the why. What is the vision? What, you know, you get caught up in all the minutia of business and life and work. But there's one thing that Elon knows, and it's the vision that drives people. And that's why people get on board with him. So I would say he's probably one of the greatest leaders of all time. I mean,
and I would say when it comes to vision, you're right about that. And yet I know that there are a lot of people who are really challenged with his leadership style, because he's so stinking hardcore, but he doesn't hide that fact. And here's, you know, one of the interesting points about leadership. Leadership is such a broad topic, right? And I think if you could boil it down to one word, it's influence. And the point that you made that I think is so critical there is you've got people lining up to work for a guy who will work you to the bone, right? He will have you work 80, 90 hours a week. And there are people signing up to get on board for that because of his vision. So you take different pieces of different leaders. You know who I thought you were going to say, which is not corporate America, but some great lessons from corporate America, is Bill Belichick.
Oh yeah, love Bill.
I would have cut this right here, because I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler fan. I had to cut this right off the air. It never aired. I mean, what went out, went out, but let's not even go into that. But I know what you're saying with Belichick. And I do like his approach. And he's very pragmatic. And it's not so much, he's able to separate the personality and the person from the product. And he's more product driven. And people don't, people either, I mean, Super Bowls speak for themselves, right? What is that in legal terms? Res ipsa loquitur, something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that.
If you were to measure yourself, or how does a company measure you? There's two forms, I think. There's the subjective form. We feel good about this. Then there's the objective result, the ROI. Okay, you came in, you had this, and now it's 6 months later, 5 months. How do you measure that to use for your next testimonial, your next credibility check?
That is a really great question. And this is an area that absolutely we could get better in, because we have some phenomenal testimonials from clients that we've worked with for 8, 9, 10 years even, where we can actually measure results based on revenue and profit growth that are incredible. But I think the subjective part, does it feel good? That we always score very highly in, which is why our clients stick with us for so many years. But I think the objective part is in part looking for, one of the things that we ask clients when we first start with them, we want to know a specific measurable result that they're after, that we can together measure and say, wow, we've accomplished this and this relationship is working. Because we have to have, from our perspective, the clarity on what success looks like for them. So whether that's at an organizational level, and we're really working to get alignment on the executive team so that they can achieve their top initiative, which is, a massive increase in profitability, or whether it's an individual who's working on a very specific leadership characteristic, in which case we will measure that through our assessments, through 360s, getting real-time feedback from the people who work with and for that individual. So we've plugged in a number of measurements, but again, I think we can always be better.
Mm-hmm.
Leveraging testimonials, and that's something I've done since 1993. I really leverage testimonials. So I'll take those testimonials, I'll use the power words that speak more to the person rather than the profession. So people might say, you were great at doing this insurance contract, or this was great, you saved us a lot of money. But then I'd look to what they say about integrity, about leadership, about what they experienced in terms of the person, because that's amenable or applicable to any industry. It crosses over lines. And I think there's something you said that really speaks to the core, Heather, of how I attempt to lead here. I think there's 3 spheres of leadership, really, for me. I think one is power, and that's by position. And I think another one is, you're an authority. You're saying this, it's a situation. The next one may be situational power, where you at a certain time, you have to say, we're taking this hill, this is how we're doing it. Then the most, to me, exponential one is influence of the 3 spheres. Power is finite. If you use it always in terms of authority, your voice becomes, they become a nerd to your voice. They're not listening. The Belichickian approach is, you better listen, because if you don't, you're out of Foxborough. But people can, if just using power for power, that's so finite. And eventually that capital goes down. But using influence and having the right people in those right positions, man, that's just how I've done it and still look good for my age. It's all about me, by the way. But I have something to say from a listener in Chicago, by the way. His name is Ned. And he says he agrees 100% that a lot of companies, nonprofits, lose the vision. It's much better to hire believers than mercenaries. That's a good point, Ned. I like that. Not just leadership. He says he loves it. He embraces it. You talked about influence. There are some things that we may have already hit that would make people more valuable in their companies. Give me inside what you think the mindset of a leader looks like. A true leader, let's say effective leader.
That's a great qualification there, an effective leader.
Ned asked that question. I just wanted to follow that up too with just one more point and a little experience that we've had with a client of ours who's this gentleman runs a business down here, very large business, and it was interesting how he has an executive team that one of his workers, one of the guys, I think it was a CFO went to go have a stress test, and the CFO got up on the stress test, ran, and nearly had a heart attack, literally almost had a heart attack while he was on the stress test. And so this CEO invited us in. We had known him throughout the years, invited us in. He said, I need you to help me with my team. I mean, these people are like literally falling over. They're working too hard. They're not taking any time off. We need to put some health in. And this was a healthcare company as well, right? And so, Heather, I'll let you tell the rest of the story because it was.
Well, I mean, the challenge was there was a blind spot there, right? He wanted us to fix the team because they were way too stressed, working way too hard. And this was someone who admittedly had not actually completed a vacation in his last 20 some years of his career. Now, he had taken them, to be fair, but he'd never finished one. He always left early and he was always on the phone and he was always working. So, I mean, our message to him was, we can't fix with the message that you're sending. So if you want us to work, we got to work with you first because you're setting the pace. You're the pace setter. They're just trying to keep up with you.
Yeah. And he required that as well for the people who worked with him. So I think what happens with leaders is that they fall into this, they think that they want something that they really don't. He was hard driving. He required that people would be, but he just needed to come to terms with the fact that that's who he is and that's who he needs working for him. You either get on the team or get off. But he thought maybe the culture, maybe the people needed to change up. But he wanted it to be that way. So I think it's not only the vision, it's being crystal clear on who you are as a leader. If that's how you want to lead, you want to be hard driving and you want to work people 80, 90 hours a week and you can get people to do that for you, well, then don't complain when people are falling apart and they're getting divorces and they're having family problems and things like that. That just comes with it. So there is some just being realistic as well.
I always say the body has to be able to cash those checks that your mind writes. And that's
right.
Holistic well-being. And there's something that I'm going to give you, Paul. You already know this. The emotional field is where people buy from first, where people connect from first, and they make everything else work through logic. You don't start with logic. Sorry, Heather. It starts with emotion. And that emotion that's what opens things up. I always say this to people in the gym who overtrain. You can intellectually understand something through logic, but it's very difficult to emotionally embrace that. And because you look and you think, I just like 8 more reps, 2 more days, just a little bit more of this, I'm going to keep pushing. And you don't know how to or when to lay off because it's very difficult to emotionally embrace what you may intellectually understand. And then, well, what install, that's going to be one of the pulls on the string. Might be a little too long. My ego's not in the way, is it? It's not the obstacle today? Good work.
No.
I'm halfway kidding around. What makes them unstoppable is they are influencers. They strive for growth, what Heather Christie calls the growth mode, and they are students of success. And you've been tremendous guests, and I'm not done with you yet. Paul and Heather Christie. So let's talk a little more about something called success, okay? How do you can collectively tag team me on this, how do you define success?
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
Well, we steal the definition.
Yeah, we totally steal it. But, this is honestly, in all the research that we've done on success, there's one definition that stands out far and above. And it is from a man who I never met and is no longer with us, Earl Nightingale. And his definition is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or a worthy goal. And so I think the way that you define success, people get so confused by this. It's not money. It's not a title. It's not a thing that is across the board for everyone. It's what you determine you want most in your life that is worthy of your time, your effort, your energy, your money. And what happens is we get confused sometimes and we just go wherever we're going without getting really clear on what we want to have. So I believe someone's successful first and foremost when they have that clarity on what they truly want and why. The why is so critical. Once they have the clarity on what they want and why, then it becomes really easy to measure that, whether or not you're successful. Are you in motion toward achieving? If so, you're successful and you know why, because you can feel it inside in every bone in your body.
I need a credibility check. Kelsey, talk about Earl Nightingale. Do I use that one?
Yes. Yeah,
you do. Use it?
I love Earl Nightingale. And I use my own. I had it since I was a kid. Mine is just the realization of my own expectations. But then I always I said, but Earl Nightingale to me has the most empowering one. the progressive realization of a worthy endeavor. I mean, I love that stuff. So once again, we're in alignment.
Well, yeah, and I think I want to talk. The fact that he adds that word worthy in there, that's how we do it. And then I just start talking, right?
And progressive.
And then I get pissed.
That it's not about achieving the thing itself. If you've ever gotten there and you've worked so hard for something, you've trained for, and you've run that marathon and you cross that line and you're like, it's not the crossing of the line that is the success. It's every mile that you train. But I also think when he puts that word worthy in there, that's what challenges every single one of us, because the biggest challenge we have across the board when we first start working with someone, I go hard after what they want. And sometimes even when they think they have ultimate clarity on what they want, it's not even the right thing once I start probing and asking questions about why. So again, that worthiness is so important and so critical in that definition. Do you really know exactly what you're after? And is it worthy of your time, your effort, your energy?
Well, and this is where a lot of our coaching comes from. This is why so many people around the world are the walking dead, because they are not progressing. They are not walking towards, they're not moving towards a goal that excites them, that gets them pumped up. That's what, and that's why there's a lot of the athletic goals, a lot of the Ironman and the marathons and things like that, because people need something to step into, because everything else in their life is not providing that type of stimulation of growth. And so in our coaching, we need to find that goal, whatever that is. If it's something personal, we got to get you excited about moving forward, because that's when you start to see people come alive. They start to generalize, they get fired up. And that's where coaching really helps.
I've got two questions for you.
Yeah.
Are you Rick or Negan in The Walking Dead? You follow the Walking Dead. You're gonna be Rick.
I don't know. I don't watch The Walking Dead.
I have a bat behind you because I thought you might be watching The Walking Dead. Second, from here with the screen, maybe it's a little blurred. You kind of got a little Tony Romo going on without the scruff.
Okay, yeah. So, he's a horrible announcer, isn't he?
Yes, I think you're doing okay. We talked about influence. How do you coach leaders to expand those fields of influence and move away from that just abject power base?
Yeah. Okay. So that is the ultimate strategy that we're after with leaders, is how do we make them more influential? Because, and look, as a lobbyist, I think there's a huge misconception these days about what lobbying really is, but lobbying is about influence. It's about influencing lawmakers to make the right decision, to give them the full picture of what this means, to educate. I mean, there's so much behind it. And I got to learn from some of the best, the most influential people arguably in this world. And here's what I know about them is they became masterful, absolutely masterful at building relationships with people. And they did it by recognizing, having an awareness that you are different from me. So I can't walk into a conversation and just speak to you the way I want to communicate. Instead, I have this awareness that you have certain needs from me. And if I'm a leader, I've got to meet those needs through my communication, through my way of being. So I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say that I'm somebody who is really impatient and very assertive and very driven, and I don't like to really have meetings or stop and talk. But you're somebody who's really social and friendly and outgoing. I can't just be myself and walk in and say, hey, I need this by now. Where is it? Because you're going to be like, oh, she doesn't like me. What have I done wrong? So instead, I modify, I adapt. We call it dynamic adaptation. That's our term, right? I have to recognize that every single individual who works with and for me is dynamic. They're unique. And I have to adapt who I'm being to be the most effective in communication with you. And every single executive we work with, every single time they have a challenge with anybody on their team, we'll pull up their assessment and the other person's assessment. And we'll show them exactly why the encounter happened the way it did. And then I'll have them tell me how they could have adapted to be way more successful in that encounter. Now, what's really critical to understand though, and this is confusing for a lot of people at first, there's a huge difference between dynamic adaptation and manipulation, right? So in dynamic adaptation, I'm being who I need to be because I recognize and value who you are and what you need. Manipulation, I'm changing who I am to get something that I want, something that I'm after.
And that's a great distinction, because I always look at manipulation as Machiavellian, and I don't run my life like the prince. So I wrote down the word adaptation because I think that's the key and critical element to moving forward in life. I wrote a book called Always Forward. It's all about adaptation to evolution. It's you're evolving or you are in decline. It's obsolescence or it's progressive. So those are the two things I look for. And I think something you said that's really struck a chord as well. There's a French philosopher who said, man's biggest fear is to be alone in a room with his thoughts. And it's much like this. We always know what we fear. But I think in the people that I've coached, we rarely know what we really want. Not with clarity, not with extreme clarity. We kind of have an idea, I guess, a wish, an assumption, but we always know what we fear. I love the dynamic between fear and really knowing what you want. You have a product called Reflect, Reset, and Go. It's a personal and professional goal setting video program. How important is it for us to reflect before you can go?
It's critical. I think it's the one area that most people don't do enough. I mean, we all get to experience life, but there are very, very few people who actually take the time to reflect and gain insight on our experiences. And how can you really set a worthy goal without taking a moment to look at where you are and what you've accomplished? So think about this. The most successful people have gotten where they are because they've set goals that were exciting and they went after them and they had fun with it. But way too many reach some level of what their perceived success was supposed to be, or maybe they've surpassed where they ever thought they would go, so they stop setting. Yep. And so the only way you can get back into that kind of thinking is to go back and look back and reflect on how much you've accomplished and where you are today, and is it where you want to be? And so the easiest way to say it, if you look at any given area of your life and you score it on a scale from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 sucks. Like, if you're not at a 10, what would make it a 10? So it's really that easy, right?
I think reflection can bring appreciation, and then it can lead to obligation. Here's what I mean by that. I was sitting on a park bench in Australia, and I thought, I've done a lot of things here. I'm reflecting, what's next? And then with reflection, will I have regret if I don't follow this obligation to do something now? Because with regret, you're going to be at a certain point where you might be on that park bench at 105 years old and not be able to do and execute those things you can do today. I play that one forward in my head, and the answer comes into get moving. So, I mean, that's just how I am with that.
Yeah, I think for me, I turned 49 years old, and we have such we all have such a network now of people that we probably wouldn't be connected to if we didn't have Facebook and Instagram and all the other social medias. And I think for me personally, I'm starting to feel, I'm seeing people that are dying early. I'm seeing people that, that are divorced and have problems. And it for me, reflection really is, when you get kind of halfway through your life, hopefully this is halfway through, as far as medicine's going right now, we're just counting on Elon to keep us living and moving us to Mars. But, reflection is so important, especially as you get a little bit older and going through midlife. And, I always wondered, am I really going to regret the things, everybody talks about that, but am I truly going to regret not doing things that I'm doing? One of the challenges, I think, in today's age is that life is really good for all of us, for a lot of us, If you're in the middle class in America, you are living like a king anywhere else in the world. I mean, we have to be so grateful for what we have. And it's so easy to compare ourselves with other people. We live in Naples, and right now this is season. So we have everybody from up north that are from multimillionaires to billionaires driving their convertible Bentleys, Rolls Royces around, Ferraris. I mean, it is crazy the amount of money that's down here. And it's easy to lose perspective on what's important because you see that. And, one of our friends, when we moved down here, was like, do not get Napleized. I'm like, well, what's Napleized? And they're like, do not try and keep up with these people because you will never be able to keep up with them. And so I just wonder, like, you know, if I'm feeling good, if I'm enjoying my life, I mean, with our business, I feel like we are doing some great things. We're having a lot of fun together. We're helping, we're bringing a lot of value to people. You know, the regret thing, I just wonder, and that's something that I still have as a question for myself and down the road.
Wait till you come to Orange County, you'll think you're going to get steroids. You know, what you talked about is the hedonic treadmill. Where you're moving, and what were once your luxuries are now your necessities. And there's always the reach for more, You're not living life. You're just comparing material gain and thinking find some kind of a bounce from it, which is really a joy. Maybe as soon as you buy the Ferrari, drive it off the lot, park it, you probably lose that bounce of joy, and then it's just a pain in the ass. Will you buy a red one? I know you're going through a midlife crisis, okay?
Yeah.
It's not the Ferrari though, it's the Bentley.
No, I get the Bentley convertible.
The red one?
He's already picked it up.
Cherry red.
Blue.
Oh, like midnight blue? Nah.
No, they're kind of a nice little light blue one. You don't want to get anything too dark down here. It's so hot.
Yeah.
You know?
He's very practical about his Bentley.
And I got to be able to drive my dogs around in it too. So
buy a Jeep. What do you can use this collectively, or unless the individual stories are greater. What is your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
You want to take that on?
That's a good one.
Hey.
I have so many, like I'm literally going through my Rolodex of failures right now. I have so many that I'll
tell you one of mine. Mine, I filed bankruptcy when I was 21 years old. And what happened was I just got into a lot of debt and couldn't see my way out. And one of the things, and that was a blessing for me because it helped me become who I am now and be more responsible and things like that. But for me, it was a massive blow to my ego. It was a massive blow to everything. And what I found was that when all that was going on, I just put my head in the sand. And so that was a huge failure for me not to step up and not to just take it on head on. Instead, I just let it get the best of me. And I probably didn't even have to file if I didn't want to, but I did. And I know a lot of people, we know a ton of people down here that went through that in 08. And what saved us personally from 08, I mean, the destruction down here with the real estate market and everything, is those lessons that I learned back then really, I used a lot of what I learned from there to apply them to 08, and it's really made us stronger.
It's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one that's kind of a fun one. That's still, okay. The definition of humor is tragedy plus time, right? Nice. So my biggest, one of them, I have so many, but one of the mistakes that I made when we first came down to Southwest Florida, we're trying to figure out what we were going to do for business. One of the things we did is we started investing in real estate, which for a time was not a mistake at all. Everything was doubling, I think, every 5 to 7 minutes or something. I mean, it was ridiculous down here, what was happening with the land going up in value. So I was smarter than my financial advisor at the time and pulled all of my money out of my 401k and invested in this property, and this property, and this commercial property over here, and this commercial property over there, and a piece of land that I'd never actually seen before, a lot in Cape Coral that was waterfront. And come 2008, when everything crashed down here, and we were at the epicenter truly of the crash, especially from a land perspective, I was in the worst investments. So the two commercial properties that we had invested in, the developer filed bankruptcy and went off to Panama and started building down there with all of our money. And so with that was all gone, we saved the 10% that Florida requires. And my lot in Cape Coral, I'm happy to say I still own, and it will get back to the price I paid for it, maybe never.
2030.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it's been also a great lesson for me, for us, to look, if I'm not going to invest my time really understanding where to invest our assets so that we can grow those assets, we had to together find somebody who is actually an expert in that, who could give us the right kind of advice, because I make emotional decisions. I know this, and that is not a great way to invest your money.
Yeah. And one thing, and I would say to the listeners, just, if there's one thing that I've learned in being in business for as long as we have, especially being together.
13 years next month.
Yeah. I mean,
who's counting?
And this is a huge, a huge awakening for me was it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. It does not matter how much. There's, you get the millionaire next door, the people who make $30,000, $40,000 a year and they save up to be a millionaire. It's not the money you make, it's the money you keep. And the lessons I think we learned from our past have really allowed us to make sure that we keep our overhead as low as possible in running our business. We make sure that we keep the profit and we put it away in a separate account, and we make sure that goes into our financial advisor, our accountant. Everybody is all aligned. That's the same company, and we have direct deposits going into those, and making sure that it's automatic, that it is automatically taken from us so that we don't have to do it. So you pay yourself first. Right?
Revenues are about ego. It's the cash that matters.
Oh, great line. Revenues are about.
Thanks. I just made that up.
Gosh, take off that table. Put that down, Kels. We'll spin that back out there. You have a podcast I'm going to subscribe to now. It's called Evolve to Win. So
that's right.
Where does the audience find it?
Well, you can see this on video on the Wooditch Network, right? Which is a great place to go to find it. The podcast is produced in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine, which is our premier business magazine in Southwest Florida. And it can be found on iTunes and on Google Play and all the other formats. But you can also go to heatherchristie.com and see all those episodes.
Evolve to Win. Paul must have come up with that. It's a great one.
I did not come.
No, I don't think so.
I was trying to change the name, but Heather just.
I think I won that one.
You did win that one.
You might have already hit this in going through failure, but maybe not. You can do this collectively as well. But what would you consider your defining? You only get one. Your defining moment.
That one's easy for me. I can picture myself on my 3-story escalator at 3 First National Plaza, having just quit my job. I was a partner in a 100+ attorney law firm. And I made the decision to believe in me, to believe in us, and take that leap into entrepreneurship, which had always been my dream. And I swear that entire moment came together for me as I was going down this escalator with Antoine, who worked in the mailroom, was one of my favorite people. And he had my box of stuff and I had my box of stuff. And I was trying to hold back my tears because I was so stinking thrilled. I was ready to jump out of my skin. I'd finally done what I really, really wanted to do. And when I got to the bottom of the escalator and I kept it in, said goodbye to Antoine, and Paul was sitting outside to pick me up, and I got in his car and the tears just started flooding. I couldn't speak to him. He thought someone died, the poor guy. And I was just happy. It was just like the most joy that I can remember having. That's it for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, in 2001, Heather and I both attended a program called Landmark Forum, and it was a 2.5 day program, 2 days straight, and it was really intense coaching with a group of people, and they just have phenomenal coaches there. And it allowed me, I always say before Landmark and after Landmark. So that was the defining moment, because Landmark the program allowed me to be able to leave my past in the past and allowed me then to move forward with the possibilities of my future. And that's really where we started to create this idea of where we could have our own business, we could do whatever we wanted to do, and we could do it anywhere we wanted to. And so it continues to go on. And even though I don't really ever think about Landmark Forum, I think it for me to not have something in my past driving my future is such a huge deal. And I don't really recognize that it doesn't happen anymore, but I know for a lot of people out there that their past, relationships, I mean, high school relationships are still affecting people in their relationships right now. Business, whatever, money, like I was talking about with the bankruptcy, all of those could be carrying forward and having me make those decisions. But that was a defining moment for me.
That's a great one. Both defining moments were great. You know what? And you hit it right away. And we've been doing a lot of shows. We did a show on Sirius Radio, and the toughest thing, the only one that really nailed this one was a Navy SEAL on defining moment. Everyone else wanted to take a commercial break, but you came right up with it. And I'll tell you this about that. We could go on for 2 more hours about the power of the past. And I did this in Chicago, as a matter of fact, with a friend of mine, Todd Schnick, on his podcast, and we talked about the past. And I think that for me, that if we're held hostage by the past, we not only prejudice our present, but we foreclose our future. And any kind of relationships that come with it. We're just, because we're taking those skeletons from that past closet, don't get me all fired up on this, and we're bringing them right to our dinner table. So I can wax on philosophically about that for a long time. But the tough thing, Paul, is the application of, which is everything in life. It's great to have a concept of theory. You know, I want to evolve. I want to change. I want to be an influencer. I'm not going to be, the past is not going to determine who I am, but it's tougher to apply it. And that's the human side of it. And that's where we really need to improve.
And there's technology that, you know, people don't know how to, we aren't taught how to leave our past where it belongs in the past. We think that our past just drives our future because it makes sense logically. Hey, you use your past as experience to help you move forward, but we drag all of those skeletons, all of that baggage that helps us and distorts the future that we want to create for ourselves. And when you have the technology, and I had no idea that this particular company had this, but for whatever reason, we walked in and it worked for us. So
I have to let you go because you ran 20 minutes over the longest running guest yet, because you were dynamic. You are dynamic. You're fun to speak with, and we have similar takes on so many subjects. You just happen to say it more eloquently because there's 2 of you. They are an executive coaching firm, and that doesn't really do it justice. It is Evolve Global. Heather and Paul Christie, you were wonderful, dynamic, and very, very beneficial guests on the Unstoppables. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill.
We really appreciate it.